stranger to the family. We've known you a long time.
I'm
And
very honored, very humbled, because really at the end of the day, you guys, other than knowing me, you guys know a gazillion people that I
yeah,
think should be on the show way before me. But I'm very honored and very humbled that you would think about me and giving me the time here.
well, there's a reason for it, and we're going to explore that today. And so let's jump right into it, because you hit me up with a lot of stuff and a lot of imagery, and and I want to try to get as through as much of it as possible today. Okay.
That's the
So
problem when you've been doing this for a long time,
yeah, it is.
and all the things that I've done.
Yeah. So folks, a very brief introduction to Raul Frame Gamboa from Los Angeles. As a child, Frame was inspired by the movie Wild Style for its breakdancing and Style Wars for the graffiti. He would go on to organize the first Los Angeles Graffiti Expo in 1988. And since the mid-'80s, Frame has been an active contributor to the graffiti movement as a writer, muralist, and organizer. And so we're going to sit down and discuss with him that story, but as well, as I mentioned up on the top, that we're going to talk about your current career as a financial consulting advisor for individuals and for artists, right? For working artists. And that's a very important conversation to touch on for a lot of our viewers. So that said, let's jump right into it. Raul, you're of Mexican heritage, you're out of LA. So tell us a little bit about this young kid when he was growing up.
Well, my background, my parents immigrated here from Mérida, Yucatan, which is the most southern part of Mexico, which is close to Cancun. My mom was in love with my dad, who was about 13, 14 years older than her, lived across the street from each other. But to make a long story short, she got married at 16, had me at 17, and had 3 other kids. So there's 4 of us. I'm the oldest of 4. And this picture right here is, I believe, is after my parents got divorced or separated. This was my family unit. Me, my brother Jose, my sister Melita, and my sister Cindy. So long time ago, holding some kind of a doll that I'm sure is probably worth $1 million.
So when you were a
This
kid
is
coming
me.
up, what was influencing you? What kind of things were important to you as a kid, besides girls?
Well,
Let me clean my
well,
lens.
let me
Forgive
tell
me.
you. I'll tell you. Since my parents were separated and divorced, I pretty much was by myself with my brothers and my sisters. My mom did her best. She worked a job, and the whole violin story. I always escaped probably a lot of the negativity that was going on in my life through drawing. I've always drawn. I've always spoken very loud for whatever reason, and I've had every test possible to see if I was deaf, which I'm not. And then I got into music and all the other stuff. And the picture that you see here was back, I believe, in 1984. And to the left on the screen in the red, that's the famous Patty Love. So funny. A lot of people used to think that she was a writer every time because I would put her name on all my pieces, but no, she didn't write. But that's her, and then her sisters. And I used to DJ. I used to break dance. And 82, 83, I thought I was going to be a break dancer. And then, we watched Wild Style. And then one day I woke up to a PBS program of Style Wars. Now, before I met Patty, I used to write my name and my girlfriend's name everywhere. And she lived in Santa Barbara, but I had met her in a club in LA. And I would write my name everywhere. And when she would come visit me, every time she saw her name written on a wall with a marker or something like that, she'd give me a kiss. So I made sure that I wrote my name everywhere. Well, that didn't work out. And then I went on clubbing and promoting parties and DJing and all this stuff in Hollywood. And I met Patty. And at the time, I didn't have a car. And she lived in Glendale. And I lived in Culver City, which was it was a 2-hour bus ride, but on 3 different bus lines. And I used to tag my name, Junior Loves Patty, on all the buses. And then after seeing Style Wars, I went through a bunch of different names and I settled with Frame. And I used to sign it really small. I used to put really big, Junior with a heart, Patty or Patricia. and then I would sign it really small, frame 1. And then eventually the Junior Los Patricia got smaller and the frame 1 got bigger, and that's pretty much how I started tagging on the buses and everywhere I went.
But who else, in terms of, I mean, there must have been somebody or something that you saw that really triggered it locally for you.
Well, in LA, growing up in LA, the graffiti that I was exposed to was gangs. So before I started tagging what I guess I would define as the New York style of tagging or graffiti, I would write gang graffiti. You know, not that I belong to a gang.
Right, yeah, but there's a name for that, right? There's a style for that.
Picassos, I mean, just gang graffiti. I mean, I don't know if there's I don't know if there's a particular type of thing, but I remember me and my brother, we used to have notepads, and we shared the same room, and we would all pick, like, he would pick like 2 or 3 gang names, and I would pick 2 or 3 gang names, and we would practice the gang calligraphy, and we would pass each other's notepad over and cross each other out and say puta, leva, 187, muertos, and all this other shit. But I knew that I didn't really want to be a part of a gang, because even when I was really young, I remember my dad whipping my ass when he caught me spray painting gang stuff in back of our garage with a neighborhood kid. And he took me around the neighborhood and said, this is what I don't want you to do, because, you know, all the white people used to think, all the gringos, he would say, all the pinche gringos would think that Mexicans, all they do is drink beer and fucking bald heads and write on walls. To his surprise, I grew up being a graffiti writer, to his nightmare surprise.
Yeah, but before graffiti, there was early hip hop and breakdancing, right? And
oh, it was, you know what, hip hop, you know, breakdancing was, I love to dance. You know, I remember, and the reason why I love to dance is because my 8th grade girlfriend broke up with me at a dance because I couldn't dance with her. And she took off with somebody else that could dance. After that happened to me, it was traumatizing. So I became a dancing fool. I started learning to all the latest dances. And, you know, I was a good dancer, I would like to say. So and from dancing, I went to break dancing, and then I went to DJing and all the other elements.
Right, and we have a picture here. This is important for the sake of history and LA history. We have a shot looking at a crowd from above at Radiotron.
Yeah, that's an early picture. Yeah, that's, you know what? So how I came about the Radiotron is when I was on the bus going to Glendale to go see Patty, on the way back, I ran into Crime and Geo, and they were tagging on the bus, and I was already tagging on the bus. And to make a long story short, they told me, yo, about this place, in the daytime, it was this like youth center that accepted graffiti, and we would practice, and it was run by Carmelo Alvarez. And one day I got off the bus at MacArthur Park and walked a couple blocks, and bingo, there it was. It was like this decrepit old building that was not kept up and full of graffiti inside and out and all around it in the parking lot. And at night, it was the first, at least in my opinion, it was the first LA underground hip hop club where people from all over LA and people from New York and all these other people would congregate to this place on the weekends, where I met Ice-T and Chris the Glove and Kid Frost and all these other, you know, early hip hop LA heads, and a lot of New York heads would come out there. So it was pretty cool.
Who were some of the New York heads that would show up?
Well, I'll tell you this. I remember going to Venice Beach, and the first time I saw graffiti noticed after Wild Style was this Zephyr piece. You know, Zephyr, and I can't remember who it was at the time. Forgive me, but I do remember the silver Zephyrs. They were huge, facing the beach. That was in Venice. When I went to the Radiotron, I didn't know who all the artists were, who all the writers were, other than the ones that I started to meet. But in the early days, Soon was a very big influence in LA, where he had done a lot of stuff. You know, I don't know how far out. I remember taking the bus down Venice Boulevard going towards LA from the beach side. And when I got to this certain area on the bus line, there was all these Soon throw-ups and pieces and stuff like that. And then later on, I discovered over at the Radiotron that he had done the name in the front of the building called the Radiotron. And then all the LA local artists like Crime and Prime and all these other, the LA Bomb Squad, you know, Risco and a bunch of them. They were there. I met a lot of them there, and they were the ones doing all the graffiti eventually in the entire area. This piece right here was at the Panic Zone. The reason why they call it the Panic Zone is because you can see some train tracks there, but on one side was the freeway and the other side was the bus line where the depot was, where the mechanics. And back then there wasn't much of a squad of RTD police, the Metro police that were after us. We were worried about the gangs, and having to worry about the police and the gangs and all that, which is kind of like one of the things because there were so many gangs in that area. That was one of the reasons why they call it the Panic Zone, because you'd panic as soon as you see a whole group of people coming over your way, or cops or whatever it is trying to catch you
Let
where you
me ask
shouldn't
you a
be.
question about that in terms of, pardon me.
And by the way, this piece right here is the F is cut off. All you see is the R, the A, the M, and the E, and I couldn't finish it because we had to take off because there was trouble brewing, and I left the piece unfinished. But that's one of my first early pieces.
I'm curious as to how come graffiti writers didn't get a pass, like not gang graffiti writers, but style writers, that they wouldn't get a pass by the gangs.
In the early days, the gang members didn't know what New York style graffiti was. They just saw a Latino kid with a spray can that they didn't recognize. They kind of figured you're from a rival gang. And unlike the cops, they're not going to tell you, hey, freeze and stop. They're going to shoot first and ask questions later, or go and kick your ass or kill you, stab you, whatever the case may be. That's just the way it was, you know. And then, interestingly enough, a lot of the gang kids, as hip hop started growing and graffiti started growing and all this other stuff, a lot of the young kids wanted to start tagging. And some of these people were affiliated with gangs, and some, you know, eventually certain crews and certain writers were affiliated with gangs. You know, you just couldn't, it was very difficult to separate the two. And for me, that was important because I didn't want to be labeled a gang member. You know, I was doing it because I just wanted to get up and get famous. And in the beginning, it was just really about getting kisses
So how
from
did
my
you stay
girlfriend.
neutral? How did you manage to stay neutral?
I made friends with the gangs. You know, I remember when I met Rick and Gio, they lived in a neighborhood that was predominantly ruled by Rockwood Street. And, you know, I'm not going to put anybody on blast here, but, you know, some of the people that I hung out with were gang members who were also taggers and writers. And because I hung out with them, it was cool. You know, and it's so funny because I lived on the west side. So I would take 2 buses to get to where the bad neighborhood was, and hang out with all these gangsters and stuff like that, to hang out with other graffiti writers and learn to draw. Because in the beginning, my biggest influence was Crime, Rick One from the LA Bomb Squad. That was in 1984, until he started the crew that I first represented, which was K2S, Kill to Succeed. And when he made that up, there was 5 of us, and we would go to his house when we weren't at the Radiotron to go and practice drawing and practice lettering and stuff like that, you know?
That's a good segue into this photo, the K2S and photo
STN.
With Risky and Slick. And of course, you know, there was always rivalry, right? In graph, it was either it was a style rivalry. Sometimes it became physical here in New York. But this one is after the fact of the famous Slick and Hex battle, right?
Yeah. You know, I don't know if this came before or after, to be honest with you. I'm an old man, so remembering these things is kind of a little bit difficult, but this is the Levitt's
Slick
yard.
will clear it up for us then.
Yeah, this is the Levitt's yard. And it was a yard that I ended up getting because I was dating the daughter of the manager of this spot. And she let us have it, you know, because it was already filled with gang graffiti. And it was a huge wall overlooking the Los Angeles River, and just on the other side was the 5 freeway, so it was like these massive walls. And I would invite people to come over and paint, and this is some of the stuff that happened. If you notice, a lot of my early stuff, very simple, but they were very big, very colorful. I was really just experimenting with color. If you could look at Risky's piece, that dude's like far advanced. I'm like still crawling while this guy's jogging all around me, running, you know. His pieces were incredible. And then Slick's characters were one of a kind at the time, when you would be used to looking at just two-dimensional b-boys with the big chin and the glasses. Slick was throwing this three-dimensional shading to it, which was just incredible. And I ended up recruiting him. He was from Hawaii. I ended up recruiting him into K2S, and probably one of the best things that ever happened to LA.
How so?
Well, you know, he was very influential. A lot of people started copying his character style. And it just opened up a whole new, how can I say, it was a whole new vision of how characters were actually being drawn on the walls and stuff. I wasn't very big in characters. If some of the photos that I sent you, one of them was of Magic Johnson. This is my attempt of character.
Let's hold that thought for a second before you go to Magic. We'll talk about Magic, right? But going back to how characters were illustrated, here we see...
This is the flyer I did. I actually drew this, and it was advertising the graffiti show that I did in '88 with Carmelo Alvarez at the LA Photo Center. And the way that came about was because Jim Prigoff had come earlier, sometime in '87 maybe, and I got to know him. I took him around town taking pictures. This is when he was taking photographs for his Spray Can art book. And what happened here was, we were supposed to do an event in Venice Beach with another organization, and that fell through. And I already had developed a relationship with graffiti writers all over LA and in different places. And all these people were expected to come to this show, and now there was no show. So I went to Carmelo. Carmelo had influence or connections with the City of Los Angeles Cultural Affairs Department. And we ended up with Glenn Avila at the Photography Center in 1988, which was the first show that we had put together, which had maybe about 500, 600 people that showed up, which was really cool. And we all painted on canvases. I got a lot of donations for spray paint.
Let me ask you, why did you take on that role of advocating for other writers and contextualizing it in kind of a salon style art show?
You know, I could tell you now, you know, because I love meeting people. I love meeting writers. To me, it was all about the art. It was graft. It was all about getting up. I didn't give a fuck about making money or going in galleries. That wasn't my thing. And a lot of my influence actually came from watching Style Wars. And the two people that I really kind of like connected to, even though I never, at that time I never had met them, was Cap, when he was talking about more, not the biggest or the beautifulest, but more, and then Scheme. Scheme was a big influence because he was like, you know, it's not for everybody, it's just for us. So that mentality was in my head. So I wanted to create an event where a lot of us got together, because I would see Style Wars and there was the bench where all these writers got together, and that was cool as fuck. I was like, whoa, hey, I get, you know, you see their name up, you just wanted to kind of like see a name and a face put together. But the other part of it was here, if you notice, I've been in the newspaper, I've been in media a lot because I was very vocal about all this stuff. The one thing that I noticed in the news, because we are a gang city, Los Angeles is a gang city, most of the time whenever they depicted gang stories, they would show graffiti art. So I started speaking up, say, hey, no, you got that wrong. A lot of the people that are doing this artwork, like me, are not graffiti writers. That's kind of like 1989, how my throw up was.
But this is, to your point, this is what they would be assuming is gang graffiti.
It was gangs, and it wasn't gangs because it was so new. And it wasn't until later on, as cops got smart, as they started busting, and no, we don't belong to gangs. This is graffiti. We just want to get up, and they started researching it. And I'm sure they reached out to the people in New York, where they're obviously having trouble and stuff like that, to get some advice from the local metro police over there and see how, hey, what do we do?
In terms of eluding police and trouble, one of the things you mentioned to me was that you switched up your name. You also started writing Nacho and other names. And what's the importance of that?
Well, because I started being vocal publicly, I couldn't write out. My fear was getting caught. I'd never been caught, in all the years that I've been painting. So part of the reason is you'd have to come up with different aliases to get up. A lot of people for a lot of years who are in graffiti, people that I've known for years, never knew that Nacho and Frame were the same people until later on. And, it would be like a little buzz. Hey, you see that Nacho piece? Oh, no, Frame did that. Frame? Nacho did that. He goes, and then they put two and two together that it was a different guy. I mean, there was one and the same guy, which is kind of funny to me. I did poet pieces, pirate pieces. I must have done like 10 different names. But Frame and Nacho were probably the two most that I did. Nacho was mainly, especially when I went out of town, I would travel a lot to all these different cities to go bomb. And that was the name that I used, so I wouldn't come back to my public name.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because my brother, he used to write a lot of different names, not because he didn't want people to know that he was Cal first, but also that it was a way to practice style writing, to get better at writing letters, designing letters.
Well, for me, it was I got bored of doing frame pieces. And then after a while, you get bored of just doing Nacho pieces, and you just want to mix up the letters. And I guess in that way, that would be a correct way of describing it. I just wanted to practice being able to do different letters for different reasons. And plus, the people I hung out with were really good at that. You know, I never was a style master. I don't think I'd never considered myself a style developer or master or anything like that. I could mimic, you know, whether people want to call it biting or whatever. I don't, you know, it would make me laugh when people would try to insult me and say, your piece looks like Dream's piece, like Dream did it or like Charlie did it. And I'd be like, really? Hey, that was a compliment to me because I thought they were the best of the best, you know, and for them to say that my pieces looked or reminded them of theirs was a compliment to me. So I really didn't care a lot what people said. I only really cared about the people I hung out with, which were a small, tight-knit group of people, and which later on, after, you know, Crime and Prime and Deffer and Sign, God rest his soul, and all the rest of the guys, Charlie and Dream were the two biggest influences and whose opinions I valued more than anybody else's in the graffiti game. And then later on, you know, I met Ket and Ernie and all these other people from New York that, wow, it was wonderful.
Sure.
But yeah, that was me at the Belmont Tunnel. That was a very famous place in Los Angeles.
Let's talk about Belmont because that's a very, I've painted there and it's interesting because what you guys call a layup is not what we call a layup, but I understood the importance historically of this place through pictures and then finally making the pilgrimage there. Tell us about Belmont because it's so infamous.
You know, it was infamous for a lot of reasons. You had about 6 different gangs. Imagine a pit surrounded by walls. And the reason, this is back in LA, they used to have subway cars in the 1930s and 40s. And this is where there was a tunnel. This is why they called it the Belmont Tunnel, which was eventually closed off. If you walk into it far enough, like a quarter mile, it just comes to a dead stop. But the red line used to run through it, through a mountain. And then there was this big this big concrete building. And then around the building were all these walls, which is where they parked all the red cars. It was like, this was the yard for the red car, which now has disappeared. There's no tracks there or anything like that. But anyways, this place is in close to downtown LA, which has about 6 different gangs. And they used to meet in the middle of this place or try to catch each other in the middle of this place to try to like do the gang stuff, kill each other or whatever the case may be, but they would gang graffiti, crossing each other out. But eventually, our style of graffiti kind of like came and took over. And, you know, the gangs were still robbing people, and I made friends with some of the local gangs, so obviously I've never been robbed there. But I've heard a lot of stories of a lot of people. I've stopped a lot of fights. I've stopped people from getting robbed by some of these gang members because I knew them, and I told them, no, they're with me, they're cool, whatever the case may be. My main theme in graffiti was to be an ambassador, to be the peacemaker. I didn't just like gangs. I just couldn't understand why people would hurt themselves, hurt another person over paint on a wall, or kill each other, and the violence that eventually became tag banging and all this other stuff. Here, me and Charlie, who also wrote 8, did a piece, and if you notice, the frame piece is F-R-A-Y-M, which is a different way of how I spelt it. And it was huge. The walls were about 10 feet tall. So these were pretty tall pieces for the Belmont. And but yeah, it was. And then now they wanted to make it towards the end of this place. They wanted to turn it into a public art park, but the people that were fighting for that lost, and it was now it's just filled in with a giant building, giant apartment building, huge complex.
You touched on something about advocating for other people and artists and whatnot. And one of the more infamous graffiti writers, vandals that made the news a lot was Shaka.
Yeah,
And
Daniel.
Shaka was so infamous. Tell us a
You
little
know,
bit about Shaka and his importance to LA graffiti.
you know, Chaka is a very unique individual, without a doubt. You know, he lived in a really bad. He lived in the projects where there was shooting probably almost every day. And I believe, if I don't want to misquote, but I'm almost positive his brother has been shot right there, and probably in front of his house or something like that. And to get away from that, Chaka would take his skateboard, fill his backpack full of spray paint, and take off in the middle of the night and be gone all night until all the cans were gone, till early morning. And he would just tag his name in very simple letters so that everybody could read it. Chaka, Chaka. I mean, he was just destroying the place. And, you know, until he got caught. And when he got caught, you know, they were trying to charge him, which was crazy to us at that time, with all these things and I don't know how much in millions of dollars and this and that and the other. And, you know, they had him in a hospital for, you know, thinking that maybe he had a mental issue. And, you know, I took it very personally because we used to hang out. We would paint, we'd hang out together. Not only just me and him, but a bunch of different people, you know, and he became one of our friends. And this whole movement for Chaka was started. And I used to wear these hats that say free Chaka, you know, graffiti lives and all this other stuff. And obviously you look at my shirt, censorship is un-American. So I was very political, very vocal about graffiti art and who was doing it and why we were doing it and how we were different from gangs and, you know, that we shouldn't be, you know, all we were looking for was a way to be able to express ourselves, which, you know, because of Proposition 13, they cut all the funding at the school programs, all the art programs, and there were no after school programs. And so we ended up in the streets. And if we were tagging and writing our names and this and that and the other, is because we're looking for, there's something that we're looking for, a space or a voice, you know, and graffiti gave us that voice.
I remember hearing something, and please tell me if this is true, that
God, look at my hair.
about Chaka, like I guess appearing in court or having a tag in the courtroom. Tell us about that.
So I had a car, so I picked up Chaka and Sleaze from LOD. At that time, I was hanging out with all the LODs, right? And we were supposed to go to a courthouse, not to go to court, but to go to a probation office because Chaka had to check in or something. And I got the dumb idea once we entered the elevator. Now, there are cops coming in and out and all these people, right? And I got the dumb idea because I knew Sleaze had a God dang it, you know, one of those crayons, what do you call it? Mean Streaks. And a yellow one. I go, hey, let me have a Mean Streak because I wanted a tag on the door because when it closes, you don't see it. Well, when it's closed, all of a sudden the name is there. So instead of giving me the Mean Streak, he writes all of our names. We get out of the elevator and we go to the probation office. Unknown to us, police officers got in there and said, yo, this just happened. And they are going through the entire building looking for us, and we didn't know this until they found us. And when they found us, they started accusing us, and they found the Mean Streak, but they didn't see us doing it because there's no cameras in the elevator. So they took us to this empty courtroom, and they held us there for about 2 hours without charging us. And at the end of it, they let us go without charging us with anything. But when we left the courtroom, and there's news footage on YouTube if you want to look it up and stuff like that, of me, Chaka, and Sleaze walking out. First I think it was Sleaze, then Chaka, then me. And I don't want to get caught on camera. So all you see is my arm. You'll see a few glimpses. There's pictures of me here and there. And we left the courtroom filled with, it was almost like, how the hell did the media get aware that we were held at the courtroom? And it was just it was a circus, a media circus. We got into the car, we ran to the car, and we got into the car, and we had news cameras with people hanging out the window trying to stop us for an interview, and we just kept on going and left. And that's basically what happened. But Chaka didn't do it, even though he got in trouble for it. Sleaze did it, but it was my idea. At least that's how I remember it.
All this for graffiti, you know, and in the end, like you said, you're looking. Again, you play both sides of the fence, right? Emotionally, you're trying to find space and community with writers and stuff like that. But again, the other part of it, you're, you know, taking over public space, unused space.
You know, it's funny right there. I did that nose piece, and there's a cap coat, not the biggest and not the beautifulest, but more. Cap was I love that. I just love that line, that phrase that he said. But yeah, you know, there was my public frame persona who was political and fought for the youth, and that we're not gang members, and that we are good, you know, we're all kinds of different kinds of kids. If you get to know us, that's why the graffiti shows happen. This piece right here, can I tell you something about this piece? This was in a really bad gang neighborhood off of 3rd Street on a swap meet. Rick One from the Alley Bomb Squad, Crime, did this so quick. It's just an outline. And look, I got goosebumps just thinking about it. I consider this piece to this day to be the baddest piece I've ever seen in my life. You know, the fact that he did it just with one can, illegally, he didn't have permission to do this. And he just did this, just the way he made his letters interlock and flow, to me was like, wow. That was like, to me, that was the standard. If you can get this good, you're a badass. This was, right. To me, this was very emotional to see this piece. It was incredible for me. But so, yeah, I played both sides of the fence.
To this point, we're seeing variations and talking about variations on graffiti writing. But also there is another part of it, which you mentioned earlier, right? The Magic Johnson mural, right? Where now it could be more than just graffiti. It can be graffiti and traditional typeface, but it also can be mural art. It could be representational.
Right. This was in downtown LA in the Arts District. And the reason why I did this is this was right after Magic Johnson had announced that he had AIDS. Never in my life have I ever considered that I ever had a hero.
Let's correct that, because he announced
HIV.
He had HIV, yes.
Yeah, he had HIV, excuse me. And it was a big shock. That was the first time that, you know, I grew up watching the Lakers. I was a huge Laker fan. The Showtime. And when he announced what he announced, it was devastating. I emotionally felt like, wow, I was sad. And within the next week or two, I decided to do this in dedication to him. And now, let me tell you, I am not a character person. I'm a letter first person. I'm always, to me, graffiti is not characters, it's letters. But I wanted to do this to him, and you know, this is my raw attempt. I've never taken art classes. I never studied art or nothing like that. All this is just based on influence of hanging out with other people and just whatever I drawing from a kid or whatever. But I think I was always pretty decent at looking at a picture and trying to figure it out on the wall on how to do it. There's no gridding here. It was just, you know, hand coordination. And I did this because, you know, yeah, I guess you can consider this a mural because I didn't do it illegally, which is another thing for me where I always say, if it wasn't illegal, it's not graffiti, you know. But it was done by a graffiti writer because I was doing a lot of graffiti and I was bombing, doing my thing. And this is one of the things that I was able to do in one day and a tribute to Magic Johnson.
You sought permission for it?
Actually, there was a bunch of other people painting. And to be honest with you, I don't know exactly how I ended up with this wall because it was a great wall. But because I knew so many people and I was friendly with everybody, I would always get invited. Hey, Frame, you want to come paint? And to this day, I still get invited a lot. And I love that. That's the communal part of graffiti was probably, I got to say, is the best. You know, I can go to any city. I went to Washington, D.C., didn't know what one person, I didn't know anyone. Called Cat. He called somebody else. They called someone that lived in the city. And next thing you know, within the next 30 minutes, my phone was blowing up with, hey, I'll sponsor you. You can stay at my house. We'll take you go painting. and there was snow literally up to my chest. Oh, that's the reason why I went to Washington, D.C., because I had never gone to a city that had a lot of snow.
So
I had
that's a
been to New
perfect,
York a lot.
you know, that's a perfect segue into the next conversation about you, because you are a people person, and we know that about you,
The graffiti show.
and that, you know, you've always surrounded yourself with writers. You know, there's this likability factor and about you, that, and also, but it's also speaks to the community of artists, right? About all of us depending on each other, relying on each other, and building community around each other.
You know, you say that, Carlos, because we do get along. But there's a lot of people that couldn't stand me. There's a lot of people whose toes I would step on. There's a lot of people that hate. There was people that would cross out my piece and not put names just to cross it out. And I thought it was funny because they think it would have made me mad, which it didn't. Because once I got done painting a piece, it didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to the world. And if it lasted an hour, great. If it lasted a week, better. If it lasted a month, oh well. But I also used to bombing, and my main thing was to catch a flick. As long as I can catch a flick of it clean, I didn't mind. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many dozens of times me and Charlie would go out and paint things illegally, whether it be freight cars or freeways or whatever, and they're either buffing it out or the car's not there. So we would take these safety shots at night, which were not the best.
In this photograph, which is, it's really, I say this as an older person, very cute, seeing all you young kids, and we see a very young cat, skinny young cat, next to you.
I'm hugging him, then Zeno, then you got Charlie where we're holding him up.
Yeah.
And then you had Power. And we all had long hair. We were called the Mop Top Crew because our hairs looked like mops. And this is me, Retina, and Alloy. We just got done painting the 210 freeway. We did these huge black pieces on the 210 freeway towards Pasadena, just past, like, in San Gabriel. And we had just got done. And these guys, and these are the youngsters. I was already old. You know, I'm 54. And I started this kind of late in life in 1983. And I've always had this affection for the younger writers. And, and I always took the time to teach them, to talk to them, to give them whatever advice I could, whatever I had to give. And these guys came from, obviously they're from MSK. They came from AWR, and Eclipse and Tyke and all these guys from AWR influenced these guys. But I remember one time Casey telling me and a few other people that I was, when they were kids, because they were small, they were at least 10 years younger than me or more. And I would take my time to teach them about can control, because that was important to me. Can control is very important. Making clean pieces. I didn't have the best style, but my stuff was clean. Yeah. And this is one of the nights when we went out bombing. I was like, all right, youngsters, let's go bombing. I'll go with you. Let's go do this.
Frame, what could you tell us about a young Retina that we didn't foresee as to the artist he was going to become?
You know, Retina is one of a kind, without a doubt. I fell in love. The way I met Retina was I fell in love with his Queen of the Damned poster. I don't know if you ever seen the artwork where he used to take these giant posters of movie posters, you could say, and he would embellish them with brushwork, colorful brushwork. And I like vampire movies and vampire stories. So and Queen of the Damned was a movie that I liked. And when I saw what he had done with the poster, I fell in love with it, and I reached out to him. To make a long story short, I didn't know nothing about MSK because I had already been in and out of the graffiti scene at that time in the mid 2000s. And when I went to an art show, I somehow I reached out to him. He reached back, told me he was going to be at a show, and I went to the show, and we became friends. And he was, I mean, he still is. At least to me, he's always been a great guy, nice guy, very talented. And he introduced me to the rest of the guys, which took me back in a big circle to AWR. They accepted me at that time in the 7th letter, and which was kind of cool, you know, because here I am hanging out with a bunch of young cats who had made a huge name for themselves. So I was very honored for that to happen. Here, this was at a funeral. Dream to the extreme left, and then you got Rick. That was my big. So what you see here is Dream, Rick, and Charlie. Those three were my biggest influence. They were my best friends in graffiti at one time. Charlie, I don't know where Rick is. I hope he's doing well. Dream unfortunately passed away, and Charlie, he's in Vegas. And next to me is his son, and then behind me is Teller from Second to None.
Right. And again, the reason we're showing all these pictures of your friends, it's important because I think what people lose sight of is how important community is to us, right? And long-standing relationships and seeking them out. And you know, one of the interesting things, as you mentioned on the top, was your influence of watching Style Wars, and then years later you meet Min One, and in the middle you see the legendary Fuzz One. And
Pass me my bill.
Min One's son at the bottom
right.
And so it's interesting because you seem to seek out these people in the graffiti community for friendship.
Yeah, I was just into painting. Like I said earlier about Washington, D.C., I don't know of any other type of culture where you could say you're a graffiti writer and nowadays they look you up through the internet, but where you could, and they want to paint with you. They're down. They just want to, everybody wants to paint with you, you know, Cess, T-Kid, you know, it's like, it was just one of those things to where I really love about the community. I love painting. My thing was about painting. This is me in the BYI in Brooklyn, you know, with Chino and everybody. And it was like, to me, to be able to meet, so Style Wars and Subway Art were like the Bibles, right? And, you know, here's me and Cap up in the Bronx, went bombing. And that was like a dream come true for me because I only knew these people through the Style Wars. Then I became friends with Henry and with Tony Silver, God rest his soul, and Martha Cooper. And I met all these people. And let me tell you, a lot of these people really came because, and I'll tell you the story. When we were in LA at the Radiotron, Skep from STN went to New York. He met Notch 56. He came back with a book, and he had these beautiful character drawings, B-boys, that we have never seen before. Charlie saw that. He went to New York to meet Notch. While he was there, he met Ket. Ket came to LA. I met Ket. I also, at the time, met Ernie. So I went to New York. I stayed with Ernie, Party Pays from New Wave, at his Brooklyn loft or studio. And then from there, I went to go meet Ket, and that's where I met everybody. That's me, Charlie, and Notch. That's me, Henry. And Henry, so this is what's crazy. So I had already met my one of the two people that influenced me from Style Wars, which was Cap. I had never met Scheme. So one day, Henry calls me because he's in town for an event. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know Scheme was going to be there. He goes, Raul, hey, Frame, I want you to come to this event because I have a surprise for you. I'm just down to go hang out with Henry. So it didn't matter what the surprise was. But when he introduced me to Scheme, I was like, whoa, that was awesome. And we went tagging together and stuff. So I got to meet my two Style Wars icons. I met Lady Pink. I met so many other people. Here I got Wayne Days. You got T-Kid. You got Crash. You know, you got Cycle, me in the middle of them. Obviously, you got Mark Echo in the back. This was for an event that I was in New York for. And the fact that I believe I was the first LA artist to be invited to do an art show and exhibit my artwork with a bunch of other graffiti writers. And I don't know if you remember this, Carlos, if you were part of that, Up and Suffering, that Ernie's ex-girlfriend, I think, did, or something like that, or has something to do with it or something.
Yeah, I exhibited there, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and Ghost and a bunch of other people, you know. And the beautiful part about New York is that even though it seemed like there was this East Coast versus West Coast, I didn't feel that way. This is a piece I did for Retna, and I gave it to him as a thank you for being a friend.
So what's interesting that you say about that, right? About that transition to show work in a gallery space. You know, we see Retna here with a framed piece. And you know, the question is at what point does one decide? I mean, you decided early to organize shows, but then the other part of it is like, well, how do you convince the rest of the crew that this may be a good idea?
You know, it didn't I guess that issue didn't come up because when I organized with Carmelo the first graffiti art show, everybody was kind of down because people just wanted to paint. And, you know, people just wanted to get together, it seemed like. That's me and Martha Cooper, super cool. But, you know, it really wasn't about me convincing anybody because really I wasn't trying to do, listen, there's not a lot of artwork of mine out there on canvas. There's a good handful, but not a lot. A lot of the stuff I did was on commission. A lot of the stuff that I painted, I still own, I still have. You know, and I never really thought about selling it. But, you know, I mean, I don't have, you know, I don't know. You know, to me, it wasn't my way of making money, even though I made a lot of money doing commission stuff. I haven't had a job in over 30 years, you know, 35 years. My last job was when I was a teenager, when minimum wage was like $3.25 or something like that. I don't even know what the minimum wage is now. So I've always been that person. And here you have Deffer, you have Raul, God bless his soul, and Mr. Arquette, David Arquette. He was also a graffiti writer for a lot of you that don't know that, from KGB.
Yeah, please tell us a little bit about that.
Well, again, because I was friends with a lot of people and I got along with a lot of crews, Mr. Arquette was part of a crew called KGB, and I was friends with all of them. And we would go to the Arquette's house, I believe it was, for St. Patty's Day. And man, I ain't never seen so many old white Irish people getting drunk. And it was a big party. And, you know, we became friends. And obviously, you know, his sister was a you know, an actress. He followed in the same footsteps and he became famous and, you know, he did his thing, but, you know, we stayed in touch. And whenever I put together an event and would ask him if he was available, he'd show up like he did at this event.
Super cool. I want to shift gears and kind of bring Ernie back into the picture. Because this was actually quite important. This wall, specifically Ernie's TAB piece in that 3D style. Tell me something about this wall.
You know, it was a long time ago, and I'll tell you this. So there's two stories to this, and and the controversy part is, was this the first piece without an outline that was three-dimensional?
No.
Other people can argue and show photos. Oh no, this was earlier. This was earlier. Who did it first? The kids out in Germany, you know, Dame or whoever it was, and versus this, right?
No, you have to. Let me stop you there for a second because you have to really look back to the early stuff that Pistol and LSD were doing.
Right. And they were doing pieces without outline. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
They were doing 3D stuff without an outline, but Ernie really took it into a more
a whole different level.
Contemporary, yes. He took it to
in my opinion level. He took it to a different level. Absolutely. You know, it's just like the early graffiti pieces. You know, with early coins or 3Ds or you know what I'm saying, and correct, compared to what it is today. But Ernie in those early days really took this to a different, and I remember having a dream, and the way I remember is I had this dream, and I told him about this dream, and this is how it came out. However it came out, I was there, and if I'm not mistaken, Ernie gives me some type of credit for this to have happened. Period. How exactly? I mean, you know, I never really, like I said, I never really.
Wait, how's he giving you credit when he gives me credit?
He gave you credit? I don't know. We gotta get Ernie on let's get Ernie on the phone and find out. I don't know. Let's get Ernie on the phone. I mean, yeah, I have no idea
much about that. But no, this was so important. I agree because at that time,
I got the sketch.
Yeah, we shared studios, you know, and there
right,
was a lot of development going on, and I was on the sculpture tip. But this was a big breakthrough. And you mentioned the Europeans, and you know what? He was doing stuff before the Europeans. And again, but also, again, ideas in the ether, right? Who does what first? You know, that's always controversial. And
without photos, you can say
well,
it.
Yeah, you need date photos. Yes, I agree.
Hey, let me tell you, me and Charlie were the first ones with photos to do full color pieces in the LA River, period. From one end, from the 134 or the 110 end, all the way down to where Farmer John's was, which was City of Vernon. Wow. Nobody, and those tags and there was outlines and there was all this other stuff, but no color pieces. And until someone shows me, because I've heard people, oh no, I did color pieces before that. Okay, show me the photo. Other than that, there's no proof. So anybody can say anything. You know what I mean? It's like saying there's no, I don't know what it is about people that, there's people out there that say, oh, I was the first graffiti writer in LA. I was the one who influenced everybody. I was the one that did that. Yada, 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 yada. I didn't care about that. I didn't care about being the first about this or the first to
Right.
do that, or I didn't care about the credit. I was just happy I was a part of it.
Frame. Let's talk about the process, right? Because
and by the way, I don't sketch much.
No, well, this is what's so interesting to me because you don't. I know you don't, and we have some sketches, which are interesting to me always because they really kind of give you a sense of somebody's inner workings, right? And the line work and how they start thinking about their name, and when at what point do they have command of a style, or at what point are they exploring a style? So these are great pieces to look at, and
that's framed backwards. I don't know if people could tell that, but there's the F is to the right and the E is to the left. Can you see that?
It's interesting because one of the things that I've noticed with you in your work too was that when you paint with other writers, you guys have a kind of you adapt, right? Like for instance, this frame, if you look at it closely,
Sess.
You see Sess, right?
Oh yeah, he was a big help.
If I pan out, of course, you have a Wish 2 piece by Sess in the middle, right?
Right. And then to the right was Isra from Europe.
Right. And so what's interesting about this, and I like this analogy, right, about adaptation, right? And because your style has evolved and morphed as you matured, like you have that, but then here we have you with Retina, right? And then again, you're adapting to a style that really looks, born out of Retina's kind of his idea, right?
His shadow.
Yeah. Right.
And and I like that because I always loved exploring. So I would let them sketch out first. Usually when I paint with someone that I'm really excited to paint with, I let them start sketching it out first and I watch them and I start vibing off of it. Now, people can call it biting. People can call it I don't care about that. I don't give a rat's ass about most people's opinions. All I cared about was executing a nice piece with the person that I was with. You know what I mean? And listen, like I said earlier, I don't have a style of my own, really. I get a little bit here, a little bit there. I've been influenced by a lot of people. Revoke was a big influence. I remember in the beginning, I would sketch out and then go paint. And then I remember I wouldn't sketch. And then when I used to sketch, I would never sketch with a pencil. I stopped sketching with pencils because someone told me you're apt to do more mistakes by sketching with a pencil. Sketch with a pen and you'll be more thoughtful about your next line, right? Which didn't mean it didn't make mistakes, but I was more careful, more mindful about the strokes and the lines of developing the letters and how they flowed with each other. Then eventually I would just go to walls without no sketches whatsoever. And I would first sketch out the letters on the wall and then fill it in with color. And then I saw Revoke, who kind of like threw it all. He threw that whole concept away because he would work on his R and maybe the E and almost finish it before he starts working on the other letters. At least that's why I remember it. So I started doing the same. I would mimic that. I would start working on a letter, the first letter or two, maybe three in frame or whatever I was working on, and finish it up and do what I need to do and then get the other letters to balance with it, So my influences are, I don't mind giving credit to other people, because like I said, I'm not, here to try to pretend I'm a style master, I'm the king. Other people say that, I never called myself a king or a master or nothing. When other people say it, to me, it's better if that's what they feel. Doesn't mean it's true, but sure, it feels nice when hey, Raul, you're a king, you're this. I'm not. I'm a witness from the early days of graffiti to where it's at today. And I've had the most awesome pleasure without getting crazy emotional about it because it's a very emotional thing because it was my life. I didn't work a job. I made money from doing graffiti-esque stuff. You know what I mean? I gave up relationships for graffiti. It's just graffiti was my life, morning, day, and night. Me and Charlie used to do 300 to 500 pieces a year each. Who can say that in the early 90s that we were doing 200, 300, 400, 500 pieces, in a year. And we
Raul,
got
so
photos to back all that stuff up.
I'm going to have you pause on that thought, right? Because we hear and see the love and obsession over this, creating this
That I
style,
had.
this style of art. Yeah, but you weren't limited to that, right? You were exploring at one point something else. Now, you said you didn't go to art school, so I don't know what the context of this situation is.
So for years, I didn't take any art classes. And then maybe less than 10 years ago, I decided to go to PCC to take some art classes to see what I could learn from them.
What is PCP?
Oh, I'm sorry. PCC is Pasadena City College.
Okay, gotcha.
Pasadena, it was a community college. And they had this brand new art building and stuff like that. And I went to the very beginning. I went and took Art 101 and then every class after that. And then, when I go, I want to know what it's like to oil paint because, I lived in a studio, and I like working with my hands. And one of the first pieces I worked with was with charcoal, which you should have a picture of too. But in any case, it started with charcoal, pastels, color pastels. And then from there, I went straight to, this was one of the few acrylic pieces. I didn't like acrylic too much, but I fell in love with oils and watercolor. And I wanted to do other things that wasn't just graffiti or limited to graffiti. You know what I mean? But yet there was still this, like this was a three-dimensional piece that I did for a lot of the people that passed away. This was a Day of the Dead piece that I did for a show out here. I loved it. I still have it. And I took, the flowers on top of the head here is a bouquet, and then I got a gold chain, and I gessoed all the spray can tips.
So obviously going into a school environment and again, going back to 101.
Forced me to do artwork I would never have done. It forced me to spend hours because I had homework. And I would have to go to school. I had a certain amount of time to produce what the teacher asked of me. And when I was doing this piece, the teacher hated it. He said, this is not what I wanted you to do, but I did it anyway. And I loved it. And I kept on doing it my way.
But let me ask you something, Frame. Let me ask you something, because to me, as a Mexican artist, the theme of the dead, right, often comes up, and it's celebrated. It's not a bad thing.
That's for El Velorio. Antonio Pelayo did that show. Great shows, man.
Yeah. And so in terms of the finding an alternative to graffiti letters, in terms of what you're exploring on canvas and stuff, is that work tied to identity and heritage?
When I did this piece, and I don't even know really how this came about. I just started with a concept, and the concept kind of like led me to another piece on how this got developed. And then there was elements that were there that are no longer there. And this is like in the middle of where I was at with this. And the very first art show I ever did was in North Hollywood with the artwork of Diego Rivera, David Siqueiros, and all these famous Latin or Mexican artists, muralists. I didn't have a clue who the hell they were. I never studied art. And there was this goofy guy with a zebra hat. His name, Luis Duarte, came to me and said, man, you must be very proud, because there's a picture of where the LA Times came and took a picture of me, a black and white photo that I sent you, Carlos, of my piece in the background. I'm sitting on a ladder. And it was this huge piece that I was doing of the Mexican-American flag on one side and the Mayan Indians on the other. And it was a walk-around piece that when you entered the show, you had to go right through you couldn't miss my piece. You have to walk around it to get into the show. And when Luis Duarte started telling me about who Diego Rivera was and all that, I started looking into it because I didn't know he was dead. I thought he was alive. I didn't want to meet no one. But it gave me a lot of pride to have been my first art show, and it made
Very
me want to
impressive.
learn more about art, and that's why I do kind of the stuff that I did.
Now, you know, again, the balance between exploring personal space and graffiti space are two like absolute opposites. Because if we look at this, the dynamic, colorful side
This
of
was commissioned.
your
This
talent, but then again, the more
That was pain. That was
off,
because of a breakup.
right,
I
and
got into art. Look, okay, if I'm gonna expose myself, here we go. So I got into doing artwork outside of graffiti because of a breakup. And this was part of a series, this one and the one previously. And if you go back to the other one real quick, Carlos, you know, this piece right here looked like a piece about suicide. And because I would ask people, what do you think when you see this image? You know what I mean? And there was a poem that I wrote that these pieces of artwork were all a part of. And the poem was something like, I would rather remove my heart from my chest than to be forced to remove you from my heart and replace it with a pebble. So this was me removing my heart from my chest and where I was in pain. And the reason why the blood is dripping down is because I finally let that go. I let go of that part of me, that heartbreak, that pain, that hurt that was bothering me. And the scars that you see, and even though the picture here is a little bit bleached out with the white here, you see the main scarring on the wrist of having to kill myself trying to win the love of someone who didn't want to love me back. It wasn't because I was killing myself literally. It was the attempt. It was symbolism. And this is what made me want to go to art class, because this was all before art class, before I took any art classes at PCC. This was a self-portrait where at that time, obviously I had long hair, and I'm bowing down to my heart. This was my heart. I am a creature of the heart. I'm a relationship person. I get along with people outside of personal relationships with females. Me getting along with graffiti writers was very important to me because I wanted to make friends. I wanted to feel accepted, I guess. You know what I mean? Because I grew up in a household where there was nothing but hate. I used to watch my dad beat the shit out of my mom, and then my mom used to tell me I was a product of rape and wishes I was never born. So I didn't have love growing up. My parents didn't show me love. Yet I was growing up with TV shows like The Happy Days, where you see people celebrating family and love and, and all this togetherhood, all this stuff. And I didn't have that growing up. So I guess to answer your question, it isn't my culture that really influenced me to become an artist or to do these things, but it was the lack of family and the lack of love and the lack of what affection that I didn't get that I was trying to seek in other places. I didn't become an alcoholic. I didn't become a druggie. I was addicted to graffiti, I
and one of
guess.
the things, it's interesting because again, if we consider everything you've said so far and have shown to us, that there is this kind of very complex young man, right, looking for acceptance, but also trying to also save other people and help other people, be
Definitely.
noticed, right? Whether it was legal or illegal, or through community work. And then, of course, when you start tapping into your personal self, there's something else. You're still later in life kind of calling out for this attention. But again, this is what that talent of writing your name on the wall has brought you to this. And then, but it also brought you into in a more detached space, which is the commercial space, right? Of being
I had to make a
able,
living.
yes, exactly, enable you to make a living with this talent. And so, as we start kind of closing in on our conversation, right? It's very interesting to know you and think that here you are, this guy with both a talent for graffiti writing, a talent for organizing people, a talent for defending culture, and also being apt at commercial work. Like, why didn't you stay doing and chasing commercial art?
You know what? Getting older doesn't mean that you stay together. You start to fall apart. Not that I'm falling apart, but I wanted to I wanted more. Chasing, listen, when you're young, getting hired and fired was not a big deal. That's the life of an artist. You get hired for one job, you get done with it, you're fired. You got to go find another one. It's a hustle. And up until about 6, 7 years ago, I was thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was in my 40s, and I had already started investing my money. Matter of fact, at one of my graffiti shows back in 1994, I met a girl at one of my shows, and her dad was this big investment guy, and his fear was that he saw me making all this money with art, but I was blowing it because no one had ever taught me money management. Which is now my passion, is really teaching people about managing their money, regardless of who you are, and what you think you can and cannot do. Because as wonderful as this country is with education, and I'm sure that's arguable, so I'm not going to argue about that, but as wonderful as I think this country is, they don't teach you about money management. They don't teach you about retirement accounts. They don't teach you about investments. And what is the difference between saving and investing, and how inflation affects your money over time, and the cost of living, and just all these things. What are mutual funds? What's an IRA? What's a retirement account? What's a 401k? How do you balance a checkbook? We as a nation, as a people, especially Latinos, as hardworking as we are, we suffer financially after working 20, 30, 40 years. We don't have a lot to show for it. So I opened up investments back in 1994, and I'm well off. I'm good. But now, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I made a decision that I wanted to do it and try to teach others. Because why should I be the only one to benefit from knowledge? Because the only thing that separates people that are all the ones with the money and the ones that don't is the information on what to do with money. Really. Everybody that's wealthy, and okay, you can argue that people are born into it, but understand the concept. Everybody that's wealthy was broke at one time or another. You could make a lot of money in your lifetime. You could inherit money. You can win the lottery. But if you don't know how to manage your money, you're going to be broke. You're that same person. I think Mike Tyson said something like this. I'm going to paraphrase. You give a black man $20 million. Yeah, hell yeah, he's going to go crazy. He didn't say it like that, but it was kind of like that. You know what I mean? And it's true. You are the same person with $20 as you are with 20 million, except with 20 million, now you're going crazy. You're spending it all. But you got to understand, managing your money is probably one of the most basic fundamentals, just like eating and breathing and surviving and learning how to make money is a skill. That's a skill that most people don't know. And that's kind of like where I'm at now in my life.
And so
I'm passionate about.
In terms of helping people, right? Especially creatives, right? Because creatives are very emotional. They are, very much, let me just turn on this light. They're very much, hand to mouth. They're nomadic in their ways. It's funny because one of the things I've seen in the culture, where it's a shift from having the kind of wealth you work with in terms of investment and stuff like that, towards an asset investment and collecting other artists, right? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how artists can make both things work for them, in terms of acquisition of assets and diluting assets for a different kind of asset.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm a big believer of money. There's people out there that will promote own property, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I say own money. And the way you own money is by investing it where it makes you more money. And the way you do that, the safest way to do that is through mutual funds. Usually people are introduced to mutual funds or aware of mutual funds because they have a 401k at their job if they're fortunate enough to have one. Because most 401ks, their money is really attached to a mutual fund, which is an investment in the stock market. The stock market goes up and down in short terms. But if you look at long term, over time, the market is always inclined. It's always gone up. And that's the key. To give you a quick example, if the goal was, and I don't know if people know this, but there is no age of when people are forced to retire. You could, the laws where it comes to like Social Security, they keep pushing that age back from 55 to 62 to 65, 67 and beyond, because that's money you're asking the government to give to you, to support you, which is horrible. When it comes to you putting your own money in a retirement account, and by the way, the difference between a retirement account and a regular account is that a retirement account gives you a tax benefit. And that's what everybody wants. They want to spend less money on taxes or even try to find ways to put money away tax-free. And I could show you to do that, right? But here's the point. An 18-year-old, which is the youngest you could start as an adult, 18 years old, $125 a month, every single month in the growth mutual fund that averages 12%. And don't ask me where you can get it because I can show you all day long at another time. For 42 years, right? Because I don't want this to be long. For 42 years, $125 a month, that's $63,000 out of that person's pocket. But because of compound interest, which is what Albert Einstein made famous by saying those who know it benefit from it, those who don't suffer from it, something like that, right? Compound interest will allow to turn that $63,000 in 42 years into over $1 million.
Mm.
If you wait 12 years to begin your quest to $1 million, at 18 it was $125 a month. At age 30, it becomes $500 a month.
Wow.
Because those 12 years, you didn't have those 12 years of compounding, of growth. So now you got to feed it more money to get to the same goal of $1 million by 60. At age 35, it's $900 a month. At age 40, it's $1,700. And by that time, it almost seems impossible.
So how do you convince freelance artists, studio artists to be fiscally responsible when they're so inconsistent with their income? And in fact, you know, you'd be surprised because, you know, we sell a painting or a sculpture, the gallery takes half, and then the government takes about another 30% off of that. So you're not really making money.
Which is another reason why I got out of the art world and got into my world that I'm in now in finances, because it's all money. It's pure money. You know, $300 to $800 an hour for a high school dropout, no college degree, is pretty damn good. So that being said, I don't convince anybody of anything. All I do is I teach. Through education should come an awareness that either you're going to possess or don't. Either you're going to get it or you're going to miss it. For those who miss it are going to suffer from it. Those who get it are going to ask more questions, and I'll show them how.
Sure. So as we wind down, I want you to kind of, those who are listening and who may be interested in further carrying this conversation with you about the, you know, the finance part of the both their lives. How do they find you?
Well, they can easily just go to my Instagram. It's really simple. Uncle Tio Raul. Go to Uncle Tio Raul, send me a message, and I'll teach anyone for free. I promise you. I won't charge you a dime. Information is free. I already got enough money put away, and I make a pretty decent living. I'm okay. I don't need to charge people for this stuff. But I'll teach you something just under one condition. Take it serious, and then teach your kids. Because let me tell you what they got that you don't. Time.
Yeah.
The more time is the most important factor of growing money. Just like you got to grow an apple tree with seeds, you got to plant it. You can't expect fruit the very next week or month or year. You got to give it time to grow and to develop. Yes. That's money.
Raul, yesterday I had a talk with my son Leo about investments and fiscal responsibility. He's 17 years old and he's interested in finance and stuff like that.
Send him my way. I'll teach him for free, bro.
And you know, I came up at a time where that's, you know, and I talk about this often, right? About, you know, the trauma of poverty, right? And your relationship with money and finance and investing. When you don't have, you feel like you'll never have. And you pick and choose how you enrich your life, let's just say. And that's, artists usually choose arts and creativity and community in that regard. But it was interesting in the conversation with him because his world is seeing something very different in terms of what money is, in terms of cryptocurrency and things like that. And one of the things that was very fascinating in the conversation was this new form of art crypto, right? The currency of art in the crypto space. And I want artists to be familiar with that, because that's an emerging space for us, you know, in terms of how we, couple things, not just create value for our art, but it is also something that tracks and also protects our art, right? Because there's a kind of validation in that process that says you are the rightful owner of this work, right? Because it's not just about protecting, as artists anyway, protecting your physical assets, right? It's how do you protect the legacy of that, right? Of that asset. And that ties into this whole other conversation about one's fiscal portfolio.
Mm-hmm. And you know, look, I know some. I have some cryptocurrency, not because I wanted it, but because I have clients that are younger than me that are all about it. I researched it, and my only reply is this: at the end of the day, there is no government on the planet that's going to allow anything to get in the way of paper money. Governments are now getting into the cryptocurrency circuit. You get what I'm saying? And there's a lot of different ones. And who's going to end up, it's kind of like right now, there's a bunch of people like jockeying for space, but the 1 or 2 or 3 cryptocurrencies, who knows who they're going to be. So I got a little bit invested here. I got some Bitcoin that I got years ago for super cheap, which people tell me, wow, I'm rich. But I don't care. Because I don't know where I can't go to McDonald's to spend it. You know, maybe one day I go to the dark web and go order someone to get murdered. I don't know. You know, cryptocurrency is going to be good for something, maybe. I don't know. But
I'll share this with you
cash.
because my son put me onto cryptocurrency years ago, saying invest in this, and I said no, because he was really into it. Him and his friend, right? His friend went on to be a 16-year-old, right? Ended up having a big position with Ethereum in terms of programming.
Wow.
Right? This kid made a lot of bank. I mean,
sure.
at such a young age.
And, you know, and can I tell you, here's the scary part, though. Cryptocurrency doesn't produce nothing. It's all based on hype of value, unless it has a service or something like that. Now there's a bunch of crypto. Now, I'm not a cryptocurrency expert. I'm just saying, based on the past, when I looked up Bitcoin, the idea of Bitcoin no longer exists. Yes, it's valuable, but the concept of why it was developed is now being hoarded out because, listen, all these people that bought Bitcoins early on, for them to become rich, what do they have to convert that Bitcoin to? Money. Government money. Which is what Bitcoin was against in the first place. But anyways, that's a whole other story. But here's the point. The point is this. Regardless of what you believe in, time to get in, when you get in early into something, into a habit of putting money away, where it's growing, not just sitting there, but growing, whether because of interest or value, however you want to do it, appreciation, that's what you got to do young. You can't be spending all your money. And unfortunately, we live in a world of commercialism where everything is being bombarded to us by spend your money, spend your money, spend your money, spend your money. And that's the sad part because that's what we do.
I gather we have some people who are older of age, middle age and whatnot. So there's a whole different strategy for them. So I want to just remind them that you can contact Frame either at Raul_frame.DTK. And
the best way is really simple. I have a second Instagram, which is what this is at. Really simple. Uncle Tío Raul. All my clients call me Uncle or Tío, which is Uncle and Tío is, you know, same word. One's in English, one's in Spanish. All one word. Uncle Tío Raul. Send me a message. I'll be more than happy to have a great conversation with you guys about any of this stuff anytime.
Well, Raul, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us and really taking us on a really beautiful journey. And
so much more we left out, bro. I mean, only because of time. I understand. Trust me. When you're 35 years into the game and you've done so many things and touched so many people's lives, yeah, you can't squeeze it into an hour. It's impossible.
No, we've been on for an hour and a half almost. So, I mean, I think, again, you know, kind of like this little speed dating we had was very fantastic to get to know you and get, you know, let the audience know who you are and what you saw and what you witnessed, and that you could testify to so many interesting and important things. And for me, I think, you know, I'm super glad that you did talk about the whole Chaka incident in the elevator, because that was always a curiosity for me. And so I appreciate you, you know, taking the time to tell us all these stories and supporting Kat and I and Allison and
Always, bro.
our crew here
Always.
in Miami.
Family. We're family, bro.
Yes.
Regardless, we're family.
And you know, we're trying to push a big rock forward and piece a puzzle, a very complicated puzzle together, rather. So again, thank you for your time. And I guess you and I will see each other on the other side of this.
Hey, thank you all. I'm very humbled. Thank you for having me on here and give my thoughts and my memories and my opinions. And, you know, I hope I was able to help and shed some light and, you know, whatever. I love the conversation, man. Hopefully you have me back again on a Friday.
There it is.
Love you guys. Peace.